Yeah, we are late. We are also live. We are also live. Welcome to a late night edition of We Are Live. And a bunch of stuff that I had to get going today, including, as you can see, if you look at the timestamp of this versus the video that I just loaded up, I just loaded the video up comparing and the question for tonight is supercharged 3800 V6, really any kind of supercharged or turbocharged V6, compared to a more traditional big American V8. So can the V8, and I think that we've talked about this before, but can the V8 be replaced by a smaller motor with the addition of boost? And that's obviously a fairly, wide-ranging and esoteric question. But the interesting thing in this particular test, in the video that I just put up, it's very cool because, and I didn't realize this until I started reviewing all of the data. It's an interesting question. A little motor with boost should be able to make equivalent power that a bigger motor does. That's not terribly revolutionary. But the cool thing on this, as we saw, and especially as it relates to the 4.8, I think more than the other LS, if you go to a wrecking yard and get a motor, you don't have to get a 4.8 liter. You can get a 5.3, which is the one that I normally choose. You can also get a 6.0 if you can find them. You're not likely going to find a 6.2. If you do, it's very, very lucky. Same thing with a 6 liter, and you could go buy those online because the guys snatch those up. They want premium money for them, but they're bigger and they're worth more, especially if you get an all aluminum one or even an all aluminum L33 or an LC9 5.3 liter. Those are really cool to find. But the thing is, you can go get those. But a typical V8 like a 4.8, can we do that, everything that does with a smaller package? And specifically in this comparison, if you look at it, it's very cool because on the smaller version of this motor, like the 4.8, in my opinion, the 4.8 wants a completely different camshaft than the other motors do. Even a comparison between the 5.3 and the 4.8, the 5.3 can get away with a lot of camshaft that the 4.8 simply can't. The 4.8, in my opinion, is kind of right on the edge of being too small for a lot of the camshafts that people are selling. And especially if you're somebody because one of the big considerations when you're getting a camshaft for a 4.8 in particular, and you're going to have it in a truck. So you have a heavy vehicle, a small motor, and then you put a camshaft in it. And what a camshaft does in an LS, in a 4.8 liter LS, is that it's going to add power, but it's going to add most of its power at the top part of the curve. It's really hard, and more so in a 4.8 than the others. As you go up in displacement, life gets easier to add power down low with a camshaft on a 4.8 compared to a stock cam, because a stock cam on a 4.8 is relatively bigger already than it is and has the same cam as a 5.3 and as the early 6 liters. They got a different camshaft, but it's easier to add power down low on those bigger motors. But on a 4.8, it's really difficult to put a camshaft in it and gain power down low. So when you put a camshaft in a 4.8, you gain power up at the top. And in this comparison, that's the most interesting thing. Not that part of it. That's pretty simple. We've been over that a lot. But the thing is, as you modify a boosted motor, in this case, the littler motor was the 3800 V6 that we've done so much work on. And I've got some updates on that as well for tonight. We're going to talk about some cool stuff that's going on with that. Excuse me. But the cool thing about the 3800 and really any boosted motor is what you do to upgrade that. Now, we did a camshaft in it, and it did at least a little bit of what it did in the 4.8. The nice thing about the 3800 is it's effectively bigger than a 4.8 is. I think it is. Well, let me do some math here. So let's see. 0.8 divided by 6 equals times 8 equals, yeah. So if you added another set of cylinders, it would be over 5 liters. So it's effectively bigger than in cylinder per cylinder displacement than the 4.8 is, which means that if we put a camshaft in it, we don't lose the same amount of power down low on a 3800 as we do on the 4.8 liter. So when we did do a camshaft in it, but one of the first things that you always do on any boosted motor, whether it's this supercharged 3800 or any kind of turbo, factory turbo motor or factory blower motor, is the first thing that you do if you have a boosted motor is you turn the boost up, because that's the easiest thing to do. And with the M90 blower, we just put a different pulley on. In the case of this particular video, I also upgraded from the early, I think it's a Gen 2 or something, M90 supercharger on the L67, and we put the Gen 5 blower on from the L32. We also changed the pulley. And so that upped the boost quite a bit. And we got a big gain. And the good thing about getting that kind of gain, as opposed to just putting a cam in an LS, which is always the first thing that you do, because it has everything else really. So it just needs a camshaft. Unless you're going to increase the displacement, then you should have just picked the 5.3 instead of the 4.8 already. But I digress. So what tends to happen with the 4.8, if we put a camshaft in it, unless we put a real mild camshaft in it, when you guys watch the video, you'll see I did exactly that. I put a 500 lift, 206, 214 kind of really small truck cam in it. And it picked up power at least a little bit, kind of everywhere. Didn't seem to lose too much down low. But it didn't gain a lot. But when we added boost to the 3800, it picked up lots of power everywhere. So in terms of modifications that you do to each one of these, now the 4.8 liter started out making more power. But as we did modifications, and especially adding boost to the smaller motor, it added power down low. But putting a camshaft in a 4.8 loses power down low. So where most people want the power with the big V8, or relatively speaking, a big V8, and they start modifying it, they're going to lose power where they probably want it the most. Now, if you have a 4.8 and you want to rev it to 7,500 and you put a big camshaft in it and an intake and a ported head, and you can make a bajillion horsepower, and you're just going to do it at 7,000 or 7,500. And if that's your deal, you're going to make a lot of power. Obviously, at the end of this, we're going to be talking about adding a turbo to both of them. And then when you do that, so we'll jump ahead. Okay, if you want to put a turbo on both of them, get the bigger V8, because an LS, a 4.8 liter with a turbo or multiple turbos, as we've seen many, many times, and you want to make 7, 8, 900, 1,000 horsepower, whatever it is, you can do that. So if that's your goal, do that. Don't, you're not looking at picking a supercharged V6 or a turbocharged V6 compared to a naturally aspirated V8. But in that comparison, it's interesting because there might be applications where the V6 would fit in certain chassis that you can't put a V8 in, or that you wouldn't put a V8 in. I think I would not be adverse to. A lot of guys, I think, should do it just because it's different. And so, we LS everything, and for good reason, because it's inexpensive. There's lots of modifications for it. You can make a lot of power. You can add turbo to it, and all of a sudden you're a hero. But there's also lots of guys that do things that are different. Guys that want to put a 455 Buick in it, or an Oldsmobile, or a 3800 V6, just because it is different. And so for those guys, if you're thinking about putting that kind of motor in instead of, if you're just grabbing it from the wrecking yard and putting it in, I think you can effectively upgrade the 3800 very well. And as I said, the cool thing about it, like if you're putting together a combination and what you want to do is just, get ice cream and do donuts. The cool thing about having more power down low, which the boost does for you, is that you can do that. I mean, if all of a sudden you have another 20, 30, or 50, or 75 or 100 foot-pounds because you've added boost to it, that's going to all come into play like as soon as you stomp on the throttle. All of a sudden, the great thing about boost is now all of a sudden whatever motor you apply it to, in this case the small little V6, it all of a sudden thinks it's a much bigger motor. It goes from being a little V6 to a big V8 and feels like that. And so we went through a series of modifications to it. So we did a small cam in the LS, and then we did boost in the 3800, and then we did an even bigger cam that made a lot more power, because you can choose the kind of cam that you want to put in your LS. So we did a bigger cam, a summit cam that in almost every case, the LS made more peak power than the 3800 did. But we get to a point where when we add a big camshaft with the LS, again, it loses more down low. Whereas we added boost and a camshaft to the 3800, now it's making a lot more power than the LS is through a lot of the curve, like all the way to 5,000 RPM. So now all of a sudden, from a practical standpoint and from a spin the tires kind of standpoint, it's actually looking pretty good. It looks like a pretty good alternative. And the cool thing is like the LS, there's about a bajillion of them out there. I mean, every time I go to the wrecking yard, I usually see, 6 or 8 of them anyway. There's always some. There's lots of NA ones, which is the next thing that we'll talk about, and maybe a video I'll do later on, is if you're going to do a turbo version of that, you could do the supercharged version and get rid of supercharger. In fact, if you're just going to do a turbo version of it, you might not want to get the supercharger unless you just plan on selling it. If there's a market for these used kind of superchargers, then you can do that, and then it has it has the boost friendly compression. But if you're going to do a turbo version of it, I think that motor is a good application for a small to medium sized turbo. Then I think you could make even more power, because the problem that you run into, every combination has a limitation. And the supercharged 3800, the limitation is you start getting into very high boost levels and therefore very high charge temperature levels pretty quickly. And especially before you change the camshaft, as we saw in all the testing, turning the boost up with the stock cam means you're going to have a lot of boost. We got up to 15 pounds with just a 3.2 pulley. So that's, a double atmosphere deal is with no intercooler on a roots blower is just like the worst possible combination. We saw that we could bring that charge temperature down quite a bit, down 70 or 80, 90 degrees with the application of water meth, which is a good idea. And then you could bring the charge temperature down, and that should make it a lot better and more repeatable. But what it really needs is, it needs an intercooler, which I have coming to me. Thank you very much. I have one on loan, which we'll be doing some testing with on the supercharged combination. But what it really needs, and the nice thing about putting a turbo on it on the 3800 V6, is that if you put a turbo on it, you can put the air to water or air to air intercooler. Either one of them will work on your application, and you can get the charge temperature down. Plus, the turbo is going to have other benefits compared to the supercharger, because it's not going to have the parasitic loss associated with driving the blower. It's not going to have an elevated charge temperature relative to boost that the Eaton does. So at any given boost level, you're going to make more power with the turbo, with the intercooler. All of that's good. It's going to be lower coming out of the turbo anyway than the blower, and it's going to be even lower still now that it has an intercooler, and then it doesn't have the parasitic loss. So it's just going to be like a triple win if you put a turbo on there. It's just going to make a lot more power, and it'll be a good combination. And then, in that case, I think even more so than with the blower, you can even size the turbo so the thing has boost. If you want boost at 2000 RPM, and you put a small little turbo on there, it's going to limit ultimately what kind of power you can make, a lot like the blower does. But you can have immediate boost response if that's what your thing is, or you can put a turbo on there that's sized to make, you can pick your number, 400, 500, 600, 700 horsepower. What do you want? And as you go up in how much power you want, you go away from having a response rate. But you can pick a nice combination in there that's going to be a good turbo deal. And then if you put that in some kind of lightweight Mustang or S10 or a little Blazer or whatever kind of swap deal you have, it on an old muscle car like the Nova that I have sitting out there that I haven't done anything with for a while, any of those things and that little motor and 400 or 500 horsepower, it's going to be a lot of fun. As we finished up that video, because of the poor LS guys were probably screaming by the time they got to the end of the video. They're like, no, there's no way the V6 is as good as an LS. LS is the best motor ever in the world. And the 4.8 in particular, because we love that. It's the 4-point grade, and it's a 4-point hate, depending on obviously your perspective. But we then I finished it up by adding a turbo to both of them. Unfortunately, it's not a turbo to the last combination that I ran with a blower, which is the one that has a good, at least a reasonable kind of comp cam. It was only like a 500 lift or so, and a 210, 220 at 50. But with that and the good blower on there, it made pretty good power. And with a turbo, it would have been even better. But the one that I ran the turbo on was just a stock blower, stock pulley, stock camshaft, and then running the turbo through the blower produced predictably high, like boost levels, because I think we were only running 7 pounds from the blower, and we had like, I don't know, 8 pounds or something from the blow, or 8 pounds, a little over 8 pounds from the blower, and then 7 wastegated for the turbo. And we ended up with something in the low 20s, I think. And it ended up making 470 horsepower or something like that, which is not a ton, given the fact that with the cam and the blower, we were already over 400. So it shows us, where we can get to with the right kind of modifications to that 3800. And as I showed you in one of the videos, even if you just hand port the stuff yourself, hand port those heads, you can get some fairly good gains. And so if you did that and put a turbo on it and got rid of the blower, I think that ultimately that would be a better combination. But the LS guys get to win out, because I ended up showing, hey, here's what happens when you put a little GT45 turbo on a 4.8 LS with a camshaft on it, and all of a sudden it's making 600-700 horsepower, whatever you want to turn the boost up to. So I didn't lose the LS guys. They're not going to get mad and say, oh, Richard's now a V6 guy. I get that kind of stuff all the time. Like I said before at the beginning of this, if you're wanting to make a ton of power, an LS or some kind of V8 and then boost, and that's a good way to go. But I think for a lot of guys, having a small motor and doing it with that is kind of cool. That's why this other guy's thing is so popular, that people like seeing what happens when you do it with something besides an LS, and it works very well. But as an update for what's going on with the 3800, today I spent a whole bunch of money, that I probably shouldn't have, but it's car stuff, so you got to. I went on to the ZZP site, and I got one of their cams. It's a 220/230, so it's essentially just a 10-degree step up from the cam that I have. They had one more that they said made more power, but it was like a 214/224. It was a high lift cam, but less duration. So I would actually like to see both of those cams run. I didn't get both of them because I don't have both those cams kind of money, but I did get those cams. I got some LS7 lifters. I got some retainers that I think are probably I'm thinking that they're like plus 50 retainers, which would be good because I'm putting some 26/918 springs on that. And the other thing that's happening with the heads that I have is I'm having them worked on, and they're going to replace valves if we need to replace them. These are the ones that they've already redone once. So I think most of the stuff is done to them, but we're doing a multi-angle valve job. They're actually going to port them based on the stuff that I did, and they also do porting there, so they know what they're doing. So it'll be interesting to find out. And I'm gonna stay with the stock valve sizes. So this will be stage 1, stage 1.5 kind of porting, and I will report and let you guys know what those flow, because I'll flow them again on the flow bench and see where we are. But we'll be able to do a head and a cam upgrade. And now I have an air to water intercooler coming. I also ordered a 2.5 inch or either a 2.5 or a 2.6 inch blower pulley, and I also ordered a 3.8, so I can do a back-to-back test with that blower and do a comparison of the stock Gen 5 blower versus the L67 blower. That blower and intake and throttle body upgrade, I can show you, once and for all. We can figure out what that upgrade is actually worth if a guy were to do that with the same pulley size, and we can kind of figure that out, which would be cool. We can do the cam upgrade, we can do the cylinder head upgrade, we can do the intake, camshaft, cylinder head, intercooler upgrade, and then we're definitely putting the turbo on it. And when I'm down there at West Tech next time, I'll go and get the other. One of the questions is, I just caught this because I was talking about the porting. David Vizard is not doing the porting. He's doing the porting on the 2.2 liter Chrysler motor. And he sent me some information that they've got the ports poured, and he's pulled them out, and he was telling me how bad they are. I don't have any flow numbers yet for that, but I'll go to the wrecking yard, get the other NA intake manifolds, and then I have the little spacer deals coming for those, the port entry deals, so we can shorten the runners and do a bunch of NA testing. The other thing that I'm going to do on the 3800 before we start making changes to it is I want to run this combination NA with the comp cam, so that we know how much the cam is worth NA and how much the cam was worth at the boost level that we ran it at, because we did a back-to-back test with the blower in the same spot. So we can figure out how much the cam was worth in both situations. So if a guy wanted to upgrade his NA motor, and he did that, and he had that kind of cam. And I went looking through all the cams available from both Intense, I think, and ZZP. And I actually didn't see anything that that was the ultimate cam that I wanted to do the big bang on. None of the cams that I saw, I think I'm leaning more toward one of the Intense pieces, because if I ran a 210, 220, and then I do a 220, 230, the next cam that I need to do is it doesn't have to be a 230, 240, but it needs to be, something that's going to be high 220s or low 230s, and then high 230s or something like that. And then I'd like something that's going to be not 600 lift, but certainly 550, 560, 570, somewhere around there. And a lot of the blower cams that they had were really wide LSA, which is typical kind of thing for positive displacement blowers. And I don't like that. I don't want that camshaft in a turbo motor. I also don't want, I noticed that the guys from ZZP had reverse split turbo cams. That's not, in my opinion, is not the way to go. I have never seen a reverse split turbo cam work as well as a single pattern or a dual pattern and make the power that it does, except, and I was talking to Billy about this from Comp today, and we both agreed that the only time we've ever seen that work is on something that has a really restrictive exhaust or hot side in the turbo. If you have really high back pressure and you want to try to crutch that with not very much exhaust duration, then that kind of thing can help a little bit, but it doesn't work for making power. If you have a really good intake to exhaust flow relationship or back pressure to boost pressure relationship, you just need to put a cam in it. You need to put a cam in it that makes power. And that's basically an NA cam, because as we know, every cam is a turbo cam. And I don't want to upset any of the guys from Intense and the guys from ZZP. I'm sure that they've done a lot of testing and all of that stuff. That's not the cam that I would choose. The cam that I choose is going to be something different. The guys from Intense had some sort of dual pattern cam. There's 234, 238, I think, something like that. And I would be leaning more towards something like that. I like to just get a shelf cam and not have somebody have to do a custom cam for me, because I want to put something in there that everybody could duplicate. And if I could promote one of those guys, because this is their thing, this is what they sell stuff for. I don't do that. I'd like to do that, but I want the motor to make good NA power, and then we'll do an all-out kind of cylinder head based on what we get from this ported head. These ported heads, we'll do something that has bigger valves. They're going to do the chambers. I'm even thinking about doing something to the tops of the cylinders to help with head flow. And I was talking to Brian Tooley about that a lot today. So we got some cool stuff coming up, but I'm most excited about the turbo, because when we run the turbo on there with a good air to water intercooler and the motor is making decent power, like I'm hoping that with the cam that I just bought and with the ported heads that were going on, I'm hoping that, and the decent intake manifold, I'm hoping the thing is near 300 NA. And that will give us a good start toward actually making power, by adding the turbo, because I think that that's going to work out really well. So that's what's happened to me. Let's see, David. Oh, and speaking of the HV3 inserts, David, thank you very much. Said they're at Westex, so they're waiting for me right now. So I need to see where the order is, and I'm not one of those guys that's going to go and get a tracking number and follow its every movement. Oh, it's moved 17 feet. Admiral, thank you very much. So Richard, I built 2-valve with 03 Cobra rods, crank, nice aftermarket pistons, 10.5 to 1. Would you stop at a 200 shot? No, if it's the amount of nitrous that I ran would be based on whatever the NA power output is. If you have good cylinder heads in that and a good camshaft, and the thing is making 400, I would feel safe running 200 on it. I don't know how much more I would go. 50% is kind of the number that we do, usually, something like that. If it's making 400, I don't know that I'd run a 300 on it, because you're going to, like I said, you just get to a point where it won't process that. If it makes more than that, then that would be great. We've had some that are up closer to 500, and then that's something I would consider running a 300 on. Goldie's Garage, what does a 3800 with the blower weigh? I don't know, and I asked that in the video if anybody knew what the difference in weight was between the 3800 and the Iron Block 4.8 liter, because I don't know what that weight difference is. It'd be interesting. Guys would want to know that for swap stuff. And one of the other things that I mentioned in the video is the fact that I was using an L67 and it made less. I think if I remember right, it was 295 versus 331 for the 4.8 liter. But I was using the L67 and I was running all of the accessories on the L67 and I was using an L67 and not an L32. So I think in stock trim, the L32 is rated at 20 more. And then if I could get rid of the front accessories and just run an electric water pump like we did with the LS, I actually think that the starting numbers, the stock numbers, if you will, would be actually, I think that they might be pretty comparable between the two. Because if we look back, some of the 4.8 liters were rated as low as 255 horsepower. So an L32 was rated at higher than that. So again, you just don't know what the tuning was on those and all that stuff. But I think that they would have been more comparable than they were if we would have started out with the better blower and stuff. Scott, what's a good camshaft for heavy truck like Avalanche or Suburban to get optimal power? What size motor is it? ProCharge Mopar, have you watched the new cam videos from Steve Morse? I have not. I like his stuff. That guy knows how to make power. He's the real deal. Admiral, I have a 270 or 274 cam, trick flow street burner, but still factory manifolds. You know what I think I have, Admiral, and it might be something for you is, or if anybody else is out there needs it, I think I have the air intake that they sold that was part of the kit with the that street burner intake manifold and the heads and stuff. I think that they had an air intake assembly that was for like a Mustang, and I'm thinking that I had that sitting in a box somewhere because we would never use that on the engine dyno, and we didn't use that in a car, so I'm pretty sure I still have that. Alex, Richard, I'm looking at buying a 5.7 LS1 swapped Porsche 944. Do you want to turbo it? Any recommendations? No cost limit. I don't do that. I don't work on stuff like that because I don't have a shop or anything. But I love 944s, especially the turbos, and even the NA ones. I had a 924, and obviously as a 924 owner, we always lust after the 944 and the 944 turbos. And I also like the 944 turbos. Back in the day before I bought my 85 Corvette, that's another car that I was looking at. And because I did what you always do when you're young, is you go through all the road and track stuff and you make a list of all of the criteria of the skid pad number and the road holding and the top speed and the 0 to 60 and the quarter mile and the fuel mileage. And, you go through all of your, whatever your list is. And the other thing is in my Mustang, when I was racing in the Silver State, I got passed by a 944 turbo. My car was the notchback, and it had at the time just open headers and a K&N filter and stuff. So it was, and kind of an open exhaust. And so it was pretty stock. And I think that it went 147 miles an hour. And I think that those cars, and I don't remember what he did to his, but he was going 160 or 165. But I would catch him through the turns, oddly enough. And I think that had more to do with, not sure he was a real driver. The car was certainly fast in a straight line, but he was conservative going through the turns. But unfortunately for me, there was only one section of turns, and then all the rest of it was like charging on the big end. Yeah, Robert, I agree. His statement is that there are so many of those GMB6s around the 3800. Why don't they have aftermarket heads? They had done those aluminum heads, but they must not have sold very well because people must not have wanted really expensive heads. Ooh, cool. Good news. Just got a call. My GTI-R is ready to pick up from the workshop after it took 5 months. What did they do to it? Oh, Admiral. Yeah, if it makes 350, you can run a 200 shot. I wouldn't start there, but you could work your way up there. Jose, when you did the Stage 4 Summit cam test on the 5.3, did you change out the push rods? And I did not degree the cam. We put it in dot to dot. I don't remember changing the push rods. I didn't think that I didn't think the base circle of the cam was any different. Ken, how about putting the water pump pulley on backwards and just use a supercharger belt? Could you do that? So spacing the water pump pulley out away from that, and then driving the water pump with the blower belt. I hadn't thought about that. That's pretty cool. What I was going to do is take the water pump off and put a plate on to get rid of all the accessories. Put a plate on, and then we have a remote Mazir electric pump, and then all I have to do is drill and tap the plate. I think I don't remember what the front part of that looks like under the water pump, but I'm sure that it's just 2 openings like most of them are, and then we just have to seal those and run water to them, and then it goes in there and comes out. And I don't think it would be too hard. Karen wants to see how the Trek Norse cam does with boost. I think it will do very well. I was talking to Brian about how popular that cam is. Definitely not a real driver. Though I've driven the 944s and they handle really well. They're very well balanced. Richard, what do you want to test some special custom headers on something? I can send you a set. We can tune it to the torque band that you want. The only way to tune it to the torque band is you have to do that on the dyno. You have to do that with an adjustable set of headers, because I've done that many times, and a lot goes into that. David, 3,800 people are cheap, so no one dumps $2,000 on heads for a car worth 1,500. Ouch. Oh, the front main leak, the gearbox leak, clutch head issues, typical early 90s Japanese sports car issues. Tyler, I don't have an answer to that question, and it's going to depend an awful lot on the injector size versus the power output and where you're at. How much injector pulse width will change the air fuel, a full number, generally speaking. You can't have a general number like that. You could have a general number like that at a specific RPM with a specific injector size with a specific power output. You could tell somebody that, but are you going to try to change the air fuel ratio at idle, at part throttle, at full throttle? Are you going to do it on one that has an injector that's 1,500 cc's on a 2-liter motor making 250 horsepower, or one that has a 60-pound injector on a motor that's making 600 horsepower that's NA, but that's 450 inches? It will vary a lot. Why didn't much happen with the 2.8 liters? I don't think I've ever run one of those. I would kind of like to, not so much the 2.8 liter. I'd like to run the 3.1 and the 3400. Richard, I had an 86 924 turbo. I do like those. Robert, when you this is going to be a good question. When you size turbos for these tests, are you checking flow chart efficiency islands to match them to the engine? No, because in most cases, and I'm going to do a video, and I was trying to figure out a way to do that today. I'm going to do a video on understanding the efficiency maps and the compressor maps, and it's really very simple. And after somebody sees this video, anybody that sees it, even somebody that knows nothing about turbos, will be able to understand what the map is and then how to place their stuff on it. But for most of the turbos that I use, there's no map. There just isn't one for any of these offshore turbos, and I don't worry about that anyways. I select the turbo based on, if you're building a combination and you want to make 1,000 horsepower, you need 1,000 horsepower turbo first off, and then after that, then you do the sizing based on what you're starting with. Are you starting with a, heaven forbid, a 1 liter motorcycle engine, or are you starting with a 6 liter LS or a 4.8 or a 3.8 liter, or what you're starting with? That's going to then determine what the NA power output is, and then where it's going to be, how much boost basically it's going to need, and then where you would want the island of efficiency be. One of the discussions I'm going to get into on this compressor map video is the fact that anybody that's going to the track and is turning their turbo up, they're not anywhere near the island of efficiency. They're all going to be to the far right side and high corner. They're going to be a far right corner on all of their stuff. All racers are going to be like that. They're not going to be any, because the island of efficiency is usually kind of in the middle, and these guys are running all the boost. So if you look at the bottom of a compressor map, you'll see that's airflow. So they want to be all the way over on the airflow, and then depending on what motor they're starting with, you're going to go up to whatever boost that turbo will support to give you that airflow based on your NA motor. So they're never in the sweet spot, unless, because not very many of us drive around at 10 pounds or whatever, for the street. A lot of guys are doing that, but nobody that's trying to make power is doing that. And Mike is done. Yeah, he's gone. Some bloke would be great to see what an NAV6 3800 could do with a cam porting roller lifters. They already have roller lifters. Porting heads, we're doing that. You don't want to combine a 1.9 rocker with the right camshaft. There's no reason to have that sort of rocker ratio to add cam lift. You should just put the right cam in it that has the lift that you want already. Goalie's Garage. I'm not a JDM guy, but any thoughts on doing something with a 2J or an RB26? Not a 2JZ and not an RB26, but I do have an RB25. And he's done. Sean, any interest in the K-Series stuff? Have you seen the videos I have up on the K-Series stuff? We did chassis dyno stuff and engine dyno stuff with the guys over at Skunk. And I wrote a book on K-Series. So if you're talking about K-Series Hondas, the answer is a big yes. Yeah, Robert, I agree. The RB26 is the one that everybody lusts after, and the 2JZ is obviously the one also. But there are a lot more. If you go to the wrecking yard and we find a Lexus or something like that, you can find not the Toyota Supra 2JR, obviously, but you can find a lesser version of that. And the RB25 was a lot less expensive than an RB26. And I'd also kind of like to do an RB20 too. It's a real small displacement, which I think is kind of neat. And so it's a small displacement 6-cylinder. Three-liter V6 versus a 3-liter inline 6 would be neat. Built bottom end performance, and they aren't worried about that loss in efficiency, the extra intake temp, just relying on the intercooler. Yeah, and that's the thing. You're not like, if the island maximum island efficiency is 71%, and they're out where it's 58%, they don't care because they were only flowing enough to make 800 horsepower there. And now they're out where they're making 1200. So even if it's a little hotter, it's still making more power. Yes, Admiral, we do need the 4200 back on there. I sent you guys, man, I got so excited. You guys will be happy to know I sent the Camshaft. Sent the camshafts off. I sent an email off to the guys at Schneider and shipped the cams out. So I don't know how long it'll take, but at least they're out. Thanks for all the help with choosing the right parts for my LS2. I'm glad you're going down the right path. Lawn Motorsports valve spring test, light rate versus heavy rate for random, not for various cam sizes. You don't want to do it with various cam sizes. There's no need to. And if you take a look up on the channel, that video is already up. I tested stock springs, beehive springs, and dual springs, and there is a change in power from those. Sean, yes, J Series Honda V6. As a matter of fact, when I sent off the email today to the guys over at Schneider Cams, I took a look on their site to see if they did any cams for the J Series Honda. And so I'm going to talk to them and ask them if they've done any, even though they're not listing any. Because a lot of times they've done lots of weird stuff and they apply grinds that they have to other engine families and stuff. And so I think that I'm confident that they can redo a J Series, which my buddy Jimmy, who's doing the NSX, which will be awesome, and I'll do a video on it so you guys can see that. He's swapping a J Series into the NSX. He's got a 3.2. And he needs cams for it. And so that's hopefully we'll have the guys at Schneider do this. Big boy adult beverage money. Thank you very much. Christmas bonus. So consider us in advance on the Coyote Big Bang. Nice. Tim, kind of off topic, but BTR Stage 3 truck cam, LQ4, 862 heads. What's a good stall speed? I think on a 6-liter, that's probably going to be, you're not going to need very much on the Stage 3 truck cam. I think it's going to be 3,000 or less. Casey, anybody else know who can offset grind an IHC 392 crank to a big block Chevy rod pin so I can get some stroke for a motor in my Scout? The only guys I know that do that kind of stuff is Castillo, and I don't even know if they're still in business. Robert, I like your channel because you test stuff that isn't all built by everyone with sponsors and bottomless pockets. I've done a lot of that with the magazine stuff because when guys throw stuff at you and you're like, yeah, I will try whatever cylinder head that is. I'll test that. Like when, we got umpteen different cylinder heads, I'll try all of that stuff. But that's why I also like going to the wrecking yard, because that's where I go get my stuff. And if I was putting something together, that's what I would start with. And that's what most guys use. Juan, I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't know. Lander Speed shop out of Colorado. Wow. Linears. Okay. Ever do rotary stuff? No, but I want to do some stuff with Rob, actually. I watched his video on them taking the rotary to the chassis dyno. He's not afraid to run boost in it, that's for sure. What is the difference between a K20A2 and a K24A2 head? I know people want to put the K20 head on there, and I don't know how much better it is. Are they doing that also so that they can get, is the K24A2 head not is one of those like a dual VTEC and one of them is only a single? Would that be a reason they're doing, or are they just doing it because it's been so long since, it's been a lot of years since I did that. Because I know that the one that I ran, the JDM one that I ran, was only VTEC on one side, or only variable cam on one side. But I don't know why you would do that just for flow, since we know that the K24A2 head that we had on there flowed a ton, and it had enough to support, more horsepower than most guys would be using. Oh, see, there you go. Tim has an answer for the IHC motor. For real, though, I might get a Coyote send it to you from a local yard with tuned headers for it at some point. Not precisely tuned, just like low, high RPM. We would just, the only thing we care about on the engine dyno is that we have headers that fit the dyno. Having done lots and lots of header tests, if we run a header on there, especially for a big bang motor that we're not trying to optimize, it's going to be fine. I think I may even have Coyote headers still from the Gen 1. Is the Gen 1 and the Gen 3 the same header? I agree that a Holder Dom collaboration is much needed. That would be cool. I'd like to go down to his place and see some of the rotary stuff. I want to have him put together one that we can run on the engine dyno. I think that would be cool. Yeah, they do make GM trans adapters for rotary, so it should be easy to bolt up. Richard, do you see any Chrysler, Mitsubishi 3.3 or 3.8 liter engines at the yard? Those probably would be in the vans and stuff, right? Honestly, I've never looked for one because it's never occurred to me. Yep, making something out of junk. That's right. Yeah, the X pipes have effect on tuning as well. Yeah, Goldies. There are a lot of reasonable stroker crank kits out there for a lot of the popular applications. Maybe not an IC though. Ron, the Holly will allow us to run either one of those. It'll run a 24 or a 58. And we can even choose a combination of a 24 and a 58 and whatever cam signal we want to. Or we just run it in batch but you want it to run both of those at the same time? Why would you have multiple crank sprockets on there? I have a truck heading for the 8s and with under $5,000. That's pretty cheap. Miguel, that's a fairly good sized camshaft. I don't know what Holley intake manifold you mean. If it's a high ram, I would pick the Trailblazer SS. All right, punk. That's good. Stay warm and have a safe trip. Staying 09er, I've been enjoying your celebrity guest dyno pilot spot in the last few Engine Masters. Yeah, I haven't seen any of those because I don't have that. I can't afford it. But I would like to, and hopefully it'll be on TV and I'll get to watch it. Admiral, I'm sure you mean Westech. Does Westech have an ECU that'll run dual port system on a Gen 3? A dual port, you mean, will it control 16 injectors? Is that your question? It's getting late, huh? We're party late, yeah. Ooh, I can't show you this over here because it's kind of top secret. Let's go, guys. Throw some more questions out there. I'm ready to go. Gen 3 Coyote has port and direct injection. They have already run multiple Gen 3 Coyotes up there, so they had something that worked. I think Mark from Holly ran those, and I'm pretty sure that they ran them direct injection. Yeah, Admiral, they've run plenty of Gen 3s there. Why a 60 or a 90-degree V8? Usually that's designed for fitment. '07 Escalade, L76 or something like that on startup ticks, but as it warms up, the sound goes away. Any thoughts? Does it have a lot of miles on it? Is it piston to wall clearance that's warming up? Is it a lifter? It's usually one of those. Yeah, the East Coast guys are probably not here because it's really sleepy. It's really late. David, do you foresee the throttle body size playing a factor on the 3800 straight turbo test? No, because the flow rate of even a let's say we had a 70 millimeter throttle body, the flow rate of a 70 millimeter throttle body with 20 or 30 pounds of boost on it is more than enough. I mean, if I have to, I can put 105 millimeter on there without any problem. Yeah, mine has about, I think that mine has coming up on 300,000. Oh, Josh, that's a good point. It could also be an exhaust manifold. Mine's like that. I have one of the bolts are broken off. Piston slap. What I do is let it warm up and then I drive it, and it doesn't make that noise. Makes me feel better. Some guys get in it and they are in reverse before the starter hasn't even engaged or disengaged yet. The starter's still whirring around. They are in reverse going out into the street. And I have a little more mechanical empathy for my stuff. How much boost could a stock NA 3800 take with the GT35 or GT40? Well, a GT35 is only going to support about 600 horsepower. So the 3800 will take that, but I wouldn't do a stock one because it's not going to make very much power. It'll make okay power. I mean, it'll start out like we saw. It should start out at, well, I don't know. It's going to start out at more than 200 the way that we test it. But I would definitely put ring gap in it if you're going to try to turn it up that much. And that's the other thing I'm curious about when we take this thing apart, and we're going to do ring gap on it also. Put head studs, surface it, put MLS gaskets on it, and I'm talking about before we do the big bang. But for this stuff, we're not going to. Don't care about that. Yeah, Ron, the problem is with the Holley, the ECU will do that, but you need different harnesses to make that happen. Tyler, so say in the 3800, for example, when going from a stock cam and a stock pulley to a 3-inch and aftermarket cam, what tells you how much fuel to add? Or are you basically just guessing? Well, I know from past experience how much it's going to add, but when we do the tables in there, because that we're doing boost tables already, even with a stock pulley. So that's why I like running the motor NA. So if we run the motor NA and we know how much it makes at 100 kPa, what we do is at 200 kPa, we double that, and then I add about 10 or 12% on top of that, just as a starting point so that we know it's going to be rich. And then so every time you go up and boost, it's already tuned. So as you go up and boost, it adds more fuel because you've multiplied all of that stuff and then you've interpolated it. So it goes from twice as much at twice as much boost, and then you interpolate it and it goes from the NA up to twice as much in a linear fashion. And it doesn't always work exactly like that, but it's pretty close and close enough to run. And we'll on the engine dyno, and before I make runs at boost, we take timing out of it. So we know it's not going to get hurt. We'll run a short sweep. So we'll start at, let's say we're starting at 3,000 RPM. We start at 3,000 RPM. We'll do loads initially. So I'll roll into it as we're doing it and go, okay, look, yeah, it's all 11, 11, 11, 11, and all that's fine. And we'll do a stationary load at 3,000 RPM. Yeah, it's 11.5. That's fine. We'll turn it up to 3,500. I'll do a roll in and we'll look at it. And if it needs fuel during the roll in, we'll play with that a little bit. I'm not that concerned with it. But we'll go to 3,500 and we'll roll in. Okay, yeah, that's 11.5. Or if we start seeing it be 12, I'll let off and I'll add a bunch of fuel. And then if it's, 10, I'll take away fuel. And then we'll get to a point where I'll do a couple load-ins and I'll go, okay, I can make a pull now from 3,000 to 4,500. And so I'll program that in and do a pull from 3,000 to 4,500. And I'm in control of the throttle. And the only thing that I'm watching really is the air fuel. I'm a little bit watching the motor to make sure nothing blows up, but I'm watching the air fuel. We already know the timing's safe. So I'm watching the air fuel. We load it up. I release the dyno. It starts out at 3,000 and starts tracking at 300 RPM per second toward 4,500 RPM. I'm watching the air fuel curve. And then if it gets too lean, you just let off and then adjust it and then do it some more and adjust it. And pretty soon you get it all tuned. But if you do the NA motor, which is very easy, and then interpolate it up at double at 200 kPa, you're going to be really, really close. Have you seen the new MBE small block Chevy heads? I've seen some of their stuff. It looks like jewelry, man. It's really nice. Admiral, we are now 2 for 2 on the 525 horse LS3, failing in under a year. No more GM crate motors for us. I've had good luck with the boosted ones, the B15s. It almost seems like you know what numbers and curve to expect based on whatever displacement you have. It's just a matter of what aftermarket support your engine has to get there. When you've run lots and lots of tests, that's a good thing, because then you expect something, and if you don't get that, you start thinking, okay, what's wrong? If you do a load in and go, this motor should be making 390 foot-pounds of torque, and it makes 250, you're like, okay, yeah, I'm missing at least 2 cylinders here. Are you ever interested in wheel dyno to wheel or engine dyno to wheel horsepower comparisons? Yeah, I already have those videos up. We see that all the time, but the thing is, people want it to be like a fixed percentage, and it can't be. There's no way that it can be, because the cars that you put it in, the drivetrain that you put them in, what you ran on the engine dyno in terms of accessories and exhaust and air intake is always different than it is in the car. So people think that it's just, okay, the engine dyno, and then the rest of it is just like drivetrain. It's not just drivetrain. Some of it is. Some of it is the difference in the way that you ran the engine. We don't usually run accessories and things like that. And in any kind of vehicle, you almost always have at the very least an alternator. They almost always have a water pump, which we very rarely have. They normally run at a different temperature than us. So all of those things make a difference. And so it's not a strict percentage. And then the thing that I always bring up is, like, look at the drivetrain on a Honda. Okay, you're going to tell me that that's the same percentage as it is in a trophy truck? We know that it's not, because we know how much it takes to spin the big giant trophy truck tires and that rear end and that drive shaft and that transmission and a big automatic like that. It's all different stuff. And for what I'm doing, I don't care about the number so much as I care about the delta. So if we make a change and we put a camshaft in it, it went from here to here. I don't compare that to other numbers from other people or any of that, because people want to get into that. And when somebody does that with me, I already know what kind of person they are. And I already know that it's not somebody that I want to get involved with, because what they're interested in is having somebody think that they're right. And It's not a conversation I need to have. Joel, what are the plans for finishing out the 3800? I talked a lot about that at the beginning of all of this. We're going to do an intercooler. We're going to do a ported head. We're going to do a bigger cam. We're going to do NA intake manifolds. We're going to do a turbo. Eventually, we're going to do a big bang on this thing. Daryl, I agree. I bet a boosted version of the LT base LV3 4.3. I think that thing would be a real power deal. And I'm hoping that Brian Tooley follows through on making that happen, because I told him I want to run one of those. You need to compound the 3800 for the big bang. Nope, it will not have a blower on it when you do that. The blower for that needs to just get out of the way. But an intercooler under the blower and then twin turbos feeding that and nitrous, you know, that has a lot of internet sex appeal. But that's not why I do the videos. It would kind of look cool though with twin turbos on it. Are you planning to keep a 3800 for yourself? I don't know what I would put it in. I think we're limited kind of by the transmissions to put it in anything. I would like to have one. I think that the Nova would be kind of cool to have one in that. What do you think of the new 4-cylinder Silverado motor? It makes 420 foot-pounds of torque. It's pretty stout, but that's the beauty of having boost, though. Are you going to try a Camaro manifold for the 3000? I do want one. I do want to. That's on my list. I actually searched around for headers, for Camaro headers, and I was surprised that Hooker didn't seem to make any. Where do you get bigger injectors for the 3800? They're the same as all the LS injectors that we have. I have everything going up to 1500s. And as a matter of fact, I'll have to do that tomorrow night. The guys from Snake Eater sent me a care package, and I forgot about that. I'm sorry, guys. I'll do an unveiling of all the stuff they sent me. They sent me a bunch of different flow ranges of injectors so that we can use those. And I've used the 1500s on a lot of LS stuff, and it's the same injector on the 3800. Are you going to upgrade the oil pump on the Coyote Big Bang? All of the LS guys would make fun of the Coyote guys if you put a different oil pump in it, because all of the Big Bang GM stuff is all of the junkyard oil pump. Is there an adapter to mate the 3800 to the turbo 350 or 400? That would be cool if that's available. And I'd be surprised if it's not, but the transmission is specific, or the bell housing is specific to that motor. Secondary timing chains. We ran the Coyote that I had. We ran to, I think we ran to 8,000 on the dyno, and we never had a problem. But I didn't do it a lot. Charles, LV3 is boosted in a GN. Oh, so in a Grand National, that would be a good Grand National motor. It'd be a lot better than the original one. 700 wheel horsepower. That's a lot. Have a pair of LV3 heads. Billy Joel. You should never argue with a crazy man. David, I have all of those to choose from. So I have multiple single turbos, and I have 2 sets of twins that the guys from Max Speeding sent me. I have GT3582s and GT3076s, both of which would work very well. The 3582s would take us over 1,000 horsepower. And I don't think I've ever run the 3076s, but I'm assuming that they would take us to 800 or so. Joel, so Transdep has an adapter for that. That would be cool. I would be interested in running a 3800 with a blower on it, and even a compound deal, if I could put a turbo 350 or a 400 behind it. Even Rose motorcycle in the rain. And Mary Christy Brinkley. Yeah, David, somebody said that Transdapt has the bell housing, the adapters. Mark wants to see me build a 2000 4.3. I think that that's about what year the balance shaft one that I did the blower and stuff on. Okay, guys, it's getting late. 2 more minutes. I haven't run any of the GM 60-degree V6s. Joel, I'm putting my compound 3800 motor into an S10. Nice. Turbo 400, 60 millimeter precision, 2.7, Gen 5 boost. Bypass solenoid set to open up at 16 pounds. Oh, to get some of the air. It was interesting that the NA motor wanted the bypass valve too. It helped. I did see the slant 6 with Webers. That is any sort of inline engine. I had Webers on my 260Z and I loved them. They look like they belong there. William Burke's thoughts on supercharged 4-cylinder versus an NA 6-cylinder. Same kind of thing, just the smaller motor versus the bigger one that's NA and boosted on the smaller one. I mean, just look at what people have done with, I mean, we did some stuff with the K24, but even a little B16 and stuff, and the B20s that we ran out of Bonneville, they make a lot of power. Single GT35 82R. Now, is that an actual Garrett turbo? Because that's different than the ones that the offshore guys are selling. The real Garrett one makes more power, but a dual bobber bearing gets me 11.5 in the quarter. I don't know what 11.5 is. A mile an hour and a weight would give me more of an idea. Oh, and 3,800 pound front wheel drive Regal. That's got to have a lot of mile an hour then. A 454 and a big bottle would work well in the Nova. That's actually more what I'm leaning towards. Is I have a Gen 6 454 that I pulled out of the wrecking yard and it's just been sitting for, it's got to be more than a year now. But that would be a good combination with a cam and springs and then a simple carburetor and a plate on it, and then put a turbo 350 or 400 behind it and stick it in there, and then the Nova would go good. When is the Coyote Big Bang happening? I don't know. Mike, my engine builder said the E303 was better than the X303 because of low to mid end power. However, I wanted a higher RPM with the option to boost either turbo. I'd have to go back. It's been a long time since I looked at the specs on those. The E303 is the emissions legal cam, right? That thing's about 220 at 50, if I remember right. And the X is higher lift, right? Was the X a 226 or something? Are you guys going to try to get an LT6 when the Z06 comes out? That's beyond me. Tyler, I haven't seen those fuel rails. Okay, GT35 or not a Garrett. Okay. Yeah, 123 miles an hour. That's making good power. How much boost is that running, David? Admiral, are you in Australia? Megasport versus Holly. I've used both of them. I have that MS3 Pro, and it worked good on the 4200. I do more stuff with the Holly just because I'm more familiar with it. But either one of them, they both do what I want them to do. If they can give me the right air fuel, and that's kind of up to me, and the timing, then it works really good. Julius, what's up? Hey, let me know. Let me know if we can help, Julius. Everybody say hi and send good thoughts to Julius. JG. Admirals everywhere. Ron, with a stock LQ9 short block and cam, you're gonna need a good sized cam with those heads, but we've done over 500 flywheel horsepower with that kind of combination. So something that's a 231, 239, or 231, 247 kind of thing. I think we were made 510 or 512 or something like that. So that should be pretty close to 400 flywheel. 22 pounds. Okay, yeah, that seems to be so 1.5 times NA. Yeah, that seems about right. Aaron's in the house. Oh, you're from Texas? I honestly haven't even looked around. I'm not going to find a coyote in the wrecking yards that we go to, but I could look online and see. I'm not going to do anything yet because if I got it now, it would just sit like all the Barras are sitting and lots of other stuff is sitting. I need to get through this stuff. Like I need to get this 3800 done. I need to get the Honda done. I'm also building a 396, which will be cool. Okay, so 20, 220, 220, 224, 224. Okay. Mike, I actually don't like single pattern cams, even on the 5-liter stuff. The E303 was nice because it was emissions legal, but 4 degrees is not a big amount. Yeah, I don't know what was going on with Mike. Okay, 498. Yeah, so sub 500 lift and then 548. Even the 548 is not a lot. It's 15 pounds of boost for a 351 Windsor. You can do that. It's not boost that you need to talk about. It's the power. He's a decently big deal in the drag racing industry. Nice. What about an N54? That's a BMW, right? Someone get the last question in there. It's time to go, time to go, time to go. It's a decently big deal. I tell my kids that all the time. You know what? I'm kind of a big deal. And they're like, you're not. You're not even close. William, we watch engine masters on split cam. So we did a single pattern versus a dual pattern cam. Are you doing any more engine masters? I did 3 or 4 episodes with them at one time. Okay, guys, I got to get going. Thank you all very much for showing up and everybody that helped out tonight. Thank you very much. That will be very beneficial because I'm probably going to buy happy hour stuff with it. But even the money that I spent on the 3800, which is good, and I haven't spent money on that kind of stuff in a long time. So it was very fun. to actually go on there and order that stuff. And I've got the springs coming for it. I talked to the cylinder head guy. I talked to the Schneider guys at the camshaft. And I have a couple of other, if anybody's interested, I have a couple of other small block Chevy tune port style cams. If you guys are look or know anybody that's looking for that, I have a couple of those coming up. And I think I have one big block Chevy cam, Gen 6 mild, like a 264. So it's kind of a bolt-in kind of cam. You probably would have to put springs in it, but it would be a good like driver kind of cam for a guy that had a truck. You know, if you had your big block in a truck, it'd still work with the factory fuel injection as long as you did a spring upgrade. Let me know if you guys are interested in that. You guys all, I'm sure, have my email address. Thank you all for coming, and I will see you tomorrow night.